Our Law and Justice segment tonight, IRS officials Lois Lerner and Holly Paz claim their lives will be in danger if they testify about their roles in targeting Tea Party groups. Attorneys for the Tea Party groups suing the IRS rejected that argument, saying the public has a right to know more about what happened. So is this a legitimate concern on their part, or are IRS officials avoiding answering tough questions about their conduct? With me now, Thomas L. Rhodes Fellow at the National Review Institute, Ian Tuttle. Ian, good to see you.
Sure thing, Liz.
All right, Ian, Lois Lerner and Holly Paz say that if they testify publicly versus privately, off the record, sealed record, all that, that they say their lives will be in danger. What do you make of this?
So it's been a busy news week, but this is easily one of my favorite stories. So we don't know exactly what they're claiming because the allegations are in sealed testimony that the judge has not released. But let's put all of this in context for a moment. The principal here, Lois Lerner, directed the tax-exempt division of the IRS for the years, plural, that it spent harassing, bullying, and targeting conservative nonprofit organizations that were critical of President Trump. And Holly Paz was her second in command. These are people who went after conservatives with a vengeance about that. There really can be no dispute. If any testimony should be public and if any testimony has an obvious public interest, it's this testimony. So the bar would have to be, at least to my mind, extremely high to justify closing this testimony to public eyes and ears.
Right. And talk to me just a little bit, first of all, about the severity of what happened, what these women oversaw, because at some point the buck stops with someone. They were in charge of this. They actually personally reviewed some of these applications that Tea Party organizations submitted for tax-exempt nonprofit status. So it would be hard to argue that they weren't involved here, although I believe Holly Paz said that that they were just overwhelmed by the number of Tea Party applications, that it wasn't, she's still trying to deny basically that they targeted them specifically.
Right. I mean, Paz, of course, was basically in charge of making those determinations. That was her special role. But this is nonsense. Congressional investigators, the Government Accountability Office, basically everyone who's looked into this says there was rampant delaying or rejection of conservative or anti-Obama groups, as opposed to the same sort of nonprofit groups on the other side, which tended to sail through the application process. But it's not just that; it's the level of scrutiny that these groups and their leaders were subjected to. Ordinary citizens putting together, your local small town Indiana conservative group had their Facebook posts questioned, had their friends and family's political motives scrutinized, had the content of their prayers demanded of them.
Right.
I mean, we're just talking
granular
level of scrutiny
too.
that was applied to nobody else.
Right, absolutely.
What's that?
It's insane. Their book lists, I believe, were scrutinized too, which is just insanely intrusive, completely inappropriate. Let me ask you this. So these individuals, these Tea Party organizations that applied for this tax-exempt status, they had their rights infringed by an agency of the federal government. They were specifically targeted for their political views, which is against the law. What did these women, Lois Lerner, Holly Paz, what accountability, how were they held accountable? What happened to them after they committed this infringement of rights against these other people?
That's exactly the question, because no one has been held accountable. For Lois Lerner walked away with a $129,000 bonus and a pension. John Koskinen, who oversaw the destruction of evidence, tens of thousands of emails under congressional subpoena, was never impeached by the House, even though the House Republicans threatened to do that. No one has ever been held accountable for this scandal. I guess unless you count Lerner's, citation of contempt from the House, which carries no,
which I do not count, because in theory it's nothing more than a slap on the wrist. No, it's actually worse. Holly Paz, she didn't even get fired. She didn't even lose her job. She just got reassigned. If of all
Yes,
the
right,
lame
exactly.
name-only punishments for infringing on someone else's right, if there was ever someone who was not fit to have the authority of a government position, it was this woman. And I guess the philosophical question here, Ian, is how are we supposed to know how government is infringing on our rights if we don't know exactly how they carried this out?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so that was one of the helpful things that we learned from the various congressional investigations or IG investigations that took place. But it's also another reason for making sure that this testimony is public. One of the ways that we verify that the legal system is operating according to the law is by making as much testimony and as much of the process and procedure public. So if this does go behind closed doors, it'll be just another circumstance in which we just have this sort of black box that we're looking into on this massively important scandal that now everyone seems to have forgotten about.
Right. I call it leftover quote-unquote transparency from the Obama administration, exactly what they promised us. So this hearing, by the way, to determine whether this testimony will be public or continue to be sealed, that happens in 2 days on May 19th. We're almost out of time, but very quickly, what do you expect from that?
Well, the judge has been skeptical so far of some of Lerner and Paz's attorneys' claims. So I think that he'll be setting a high bar for their request. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets turned down, and I'd be hopeful if it does.
Right. I mean, it should be. Their actions have consequences. They're going to have to face the consequences for those actions, or they should have to.